This paper aims at exposing the learner profiles found with the use of the Modern Language Aptitude Test Elementary, adapted into a minority Romance language as is Catalan. We are Mar Suárez, who is deeply indebted to the co-author of this paper, Charles Stansfield. Me, Mar, contributed to the standardization of the Spanish version of the MLAT elementary version in Spanish and then adapted it into Catalan. This was possible thanks to Charles Stansfield's generosity, providing me with the materials needed for such a study, which became my PhD back in the day. As for our biographies, I'm basically an associate professor at the Universitat de Barcelona, while Charles Stansfield is a well-known expert in language testing, now retired but still active, as you can see. As already mentioned, this paper aims at explaining the learner profiles found using the Catalan version of the MLAT elementary. This is done using clusters, which is a multivariate exploratory technique used to subdivide a set of objects into homogeneous subgroups or into a hierarchical arrangement of homogeneous subgroups. Dendrograms are used to graphically display the clusters found. As this is an exploratory study, a hierarchical cluster is first run in the stats program, in this case SPSS, so as to determine the initial number of clusters that is then verified using a non-hierarchical cluster, in this case the k-means. The number of clusters will then be determined by contrasting what prior research has said about profiles or with the measures used. That is, whether the profiles found make sense with the tests used in the analysis and the constructs that these tests they tap into. You also then obtain f-values from ANOVAs, which help you determine how well the dimensions found discriminate across clusters and which element is key to determine these clusters as well. What's the point in using clusters, you might be thinking? Well, basically to identify natural groupings within a pool of participants, which can then be classified for further description and prediction of future behavior, with the final aim of being able to cater for the diversity that we can find in, for instance, a foreign language classroom. As foreign language aptitude tests, clusters can also be used for placement and selection, guidance, diagnosing language learning disabilities, for aptitude treatment interaction, or just for plain research. First, though, we must make the distinction between aptitude profiles on one hand and learner profiles on the other hand, which are the focus of this presentation. When proficiency is not included in the cluster analysis, but only used as a criterion variable added later, we talk then about plain profiles. We can find studies that use such technique delving into motivation or vocabulary learner strategies profiles, for instance. While if we include proficiency, then we are in front of studies on learner profiles. Some examples are that of Ranto studying the role of language analytic abilities and metalinguistic awareness, that of Yamamori et al., dealing with the use of learning strategies, or that of Skian, who studied cognitive profiles and also included age and a criterion test score in the mix. When it comes to aptitude, we find different components in its traditional conception, as you can see in this slide. These are phonemic coding ability, grammatical sensitivity, inductive language learning ability, and rote learning ability. They are represented in different ways in the test that we used in this paper. More specifically, in the Modern Language Aptitude Test Elementary in its Catalan version, adapted from the Modern Language Aptitude Test Elementary originally in English, which was also adapted in turn from the MLAT, the Modern Language Aptitude Test for adults, we find that Part 1, Hidden Words, measures vocabulary and sound symbol association. Part 2 taps into grammatical sensitivity. Part 3 will measure the ability to hear and make distinctions between speech sounds, while Part 4 will essentially measure rote memory and oral comprehension. One must not forget, though, that these abilities are believed to change not only with age, but also as proficiency grows. Thus, it has been found that in adults, high achievers are those who are strong on language analytic abilities or strong on both language analytic abilities and memory, or on either of the two, while auditory abilities seem to be more relevant in younger students. In contrast, low achievers have average or weak language analytic abilities, have very poor memory, though might have decent IQs, and might have high linguistic ability and memory, but average IQ. The question is then, what about young learners who have not reached full cognitive maturity and who are also developing their literacy skills? Consequently, our research questions are the following. What learner profiles do younger high and low achievers have on the one hand, and on the other, what aptitude components are determinant for younger learners as measured by the Modern Language Aptitude Test Elementary in Catalan? In cluster studies, rather than methodology, we use the protocol word. I have kept both terms anyway in this presentation. Our participants are Catalan-Spanish bilinguals living in two different regions in Catalonia, Barcelona and Lleida, and studying English as a foreign language. It is a cross-sectional study with participants from grades 3 to 7 and who took the Modern Language Aptitude Test, elementary in Catalan, and also a foreign language aptitude measure, a closed passage. The clusters protocol calls for a selection of a set of variables from a domain of similarity, in this case, the aptitude components measured by the aptitude test at work, and then the description and measurement of each entity. As this is a learner profile study, a closed passage was also included as a proficiency measure. A closed was chosen as it is considered an integrative measure of foreign language proficiency. Now, the reliability and validity of the Modern Language Aptitude Test elementary in Catalan, as well as that of the proficiency measures used across grades, was high enough in all cases and across grades as well. Here you are the mean p-values of the Modern Language Aptitude Test elementary in Catalan, where you can see that the test becomes easier the higher the grade, with part 2 being the most difficult one and with a rather significant jump between grades 3 and 4 across parts. Now, when it comes to the clusters, we can clearly see that in grade 3, decoding skills are key for high achievement. And then we have profiles with either high grammatical sensitivity or with high memory and decoding skills, while sound recognition alone doesn't seem to be determinant. Grade 4 presents a similar picture to that of grade 3, with a prominence of decoding skills as well as with either high grammar sensitivity or high memory for high English as a foreign language performance. But from grade 5 on, the picture changes with two high achiever profiles, with balanced learners on the one hand with high scores in all skills or with high grammar sensitivity ones. We also find, as key indeed, either grammar-oriented or memory-oriented learners, and then we have a clear overall low aptitude profile with low achievement. As you can see, similar patterns can also be found in grade 6. And so do we in grade 7, with here a clear loss of relevance for sound recognition, but mainly as well for decoding skills. As you can see, the F values obtained from the ANOVAs show us that memory is a dimension that is useful to distinguish clusters across grades, but literacy skills in particular come second at lower grades as well. From these results, we can conclude that we find high and low achievement profiles that vary across grades, with a clear prominence of decoding skills in the lower levels. Across grades as well, we do find high aptitude even profiles and profiles that are grammar-oriented or memory-oriented from grade 5 on, when learners are already in the formal operational stage according to Piaget's classification. This leads us to think that not only cognitive achievement, but also literacy skills development are also key in foreign language aptitude measurement, and naturally, English as a foreign language performance in this case, or foreign language performance in any language. Across grades, we find as well low overall aptitude learners with low achievement, except in grade 3, where it seems that literacy development and cognitive development are more powerful in this regard. This is then further confirmed by the F values, which show us that while memory is key to define clusters, decoding skills are also as well in the lower grades. This might be due to the fact that in younger learners, memory and analytic abilities are still at early stages of development, and so their role cannot be fully determined when it comes to foreign language performance. It might be, though, in other cognitive domains. The implications of this study are several. First of all, much importance is given to sound recognition at lower levels, or we even find this lay belief that young learners are sponges and that will learn everything. This might be the case because of the still developing literacy skills. However, we don't see it in these clusters as a prominence for sound recognition either. Instead, we do find that decoding skills are still relevant in grade 5, which lead us to hypothesize that theories like the linguistic coding difficulty or difference hypothesis by Sparks et al. Can also be confirmed from the results obtained in this study. What is also clear is that the MLAT-EC, the Modern Language Aptitude Test Elementary in Catalan, works differently across ages despite tapping into the same abilities across grades. Now, these scores then on this aptitude test should be interpreted considering the participant's age and stage of cognitive development, not just alone. Suggestions for further research are, among many, the use of different proficiency measures to see how the role of the skills tapped into by the aptitude test used differ, and also if similar aptitude profiles are obtained when running the cluster analysis without including a criterion variable, as we did here with the closed passage. Thank you for your attention.